adventure, intrigue, lost cities, ancient mysteries, and more on this week's episode of East10 Investigates.
Dark mistook me, and I strayed out of thought and time. Stars wheeled overhead, and every day was as long as a life age on the earth. But it was not. I felt life in me again. I have been sent back until my task is done.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the East10 Outpost. I'm Cody, and I'm going to be your guide today into a subject that should be familiar to any culture and any people throughout any time period in history. It's the basis for all religion, as a matter of fact. I'm talking, of course, about magic. And when I say magic, I'm sure that Harry Houdini or Harry Potter pop in your mind, but neither of those aspiring sorcerers could be further from what we're going to be taking a look at. No, instead, we're going to be diving into the historical context around magic and what it meant to the people of the old world, because it carried a much different meaning than it does now. And as usual, fact is much stranger than fiction and far more interesting in this case, so hop on your broomstick, get out your favorite wizarding wand or magical staff of your choice, and be ready, because we're going to embark on a journey through mysteries and magic of the old world. And as always, if there's anywhere to start, it's right at the beginning. So we're going to rewind the clock to the beginning of written history with the ancient Mesopotamian people. It's good to know that in the Mesopotamian region, that being ancient Babylonia, Assyria, Acadia, etc., there were minute differences in some of their magical practices or their deity names. But we're going to be looking at Mesopotamian culture as a whole and discussing the prevailing magical aspects that were most popular and most commonly transcending their minute regional differences. It's also important to note that to really understand and appreciate magic from a Mesopotamian point of view, you have to understand how important it was to the world that they lived in. And that is to say, it was everything. Magic explained every natural function of the universe they lived in. From the ordinary and mundane to the extraordinary, it was absolutely everything to them. So try your best to place yourself in that position and understand that it wasn't about silly tricks or soothsayers. It was very legitimate practice and something that explained every natural happening of their world. Also important to note is there were three different types of magic that the Mesopotamians focused on. There was white magic, which was good and helpful and beneficial to the community. It benefited more than just the practitioner, and those types of things included useful remedies and concoctions and spells of healing, things of that sort. That type of white magic was allowed, but only through official sources, so you had to be court appointed to some degree to be able to practice it openly. Then, of course, there was black magic, which was negative and had bad ramifications for the people on the receiving end of said black magic. Those things included spells and hexes that would cause harm to the individual and the subject of the hex. Everything from a stomach blight to misfortune to poverty. So it really centered on aggressively hurting the individual that the practitioner was casting the hex on. And then there was a third type of magic, which they referred to as aggressive magic. And it was magic somewhere in the middle. It didn't necessarily hurt people around you, but it wasn't beneficial for the community. It was things that only enhanced for the individual practitioner different aspects of life. such as beauty or wealth. And that type of aggressive magic, as they referred to it, was outlawed very strictly, just as black magic was. They thought nobody should be getting a magical edge in life, and I suppose that's probably pretty fair. And as I mentioned earlier, it was even an integral part of their religion, having allegedly been taught to them directly from the Anunnaki god king Enki. The royal court relied on diviners heavily to help forecast and predict upcoming battles and even when it might be best to strike for a battle. So it was a part of everything that they did and a very natural part of their life. And with that mindset truly in place, we can begin to understand what magic meant as a whole, as a fabric of their society. So let's take a look a little closer at some of these practitioners and their individual magical arts. Now, the first class of magical practitioner that we'll take a look at is the Asipu. These were what we would compare to wizards or mages in popular culture, and were back then literally the court magicians, performing helpful spells and incantations to help the kingdom and its people, and would work closely during exorcisms to rid individuals of the demon that was afflicting them. You could call on an Asipu, say, to rid your sister of the demon that must be haunting her. Or a negative hex somebody had put under because she was being particularly ornery. Or if you had a bad stomach flu, you would call on the Asipu, who could reach into his no doubt near unlimited arsenal of clay tablets based on how many have been dug up from the sand, and somewhere in there he would find just the right remedy for your stomach flu. It would be a mix of alchemy and straight magic, and if you can think of it as a two-part health system, the Asipu would treat individuals from a spiritual and a medicinal standpoint, thus fully ridding them of whatever demon or curse or hex they had been put under. And that was the role of the Asipu. As I touched on earlier, they did exorcisms and would actually be involved in the same way we think of in modern Catholic exorcisms. And they would rid the demons from individuals' bodies, performing religious incantations and going over spells. And they had a number of alchemical recipes that they would sprinkle about the house and the afflicted, no different than bishops and priests do with holy water now. So there's a lot of similarities that we can still see surviving in our modern day and age to the ancient Mesopotamian people. So it becomes not that hard of a thing to understand pretty quickly when you see it still being mirrored in our modern day. Now, the second class of magical practitioner we're going to be taking a look at today is known as the Baru. They were the seers, mystics, and soothsayers. You can think of them sort of as the spiritual weathermen for the kingdom, and they relied on tried and true practices, omens, and natural occurrences to make their predictions. It wasn't just random guesswork. And one of the tried and true methods that they used very commonly was sheep's liver for divination. They would select a sheep to be sacrificed and take out the fresh liver and examine it thoroughly. Every marking, every hole, every blemish on the sheep's liver meant something to the Mesopotamian people, and we've found and recovered many clay tablets in a model of the sheep's liver, showing just how prolific the practice was throughout the old world. And today it would be easy to look at a practice like that and think, how can you predict the future from a sheep's liver? But it's important to consider that they practiced this for well over 1,000 years. And America has been practicing medicine for less than 250 years. So you would think over the course of 1,000 years, if there wasn't anything to it, somebody may have called that out or caught on to it, but instead it prevailed clear into a pretty modern time. So while it's easy to laugh at predicting the future from a sheep's liver, maybe we should actually be taking a little bit of a closer look at it. But I digress. The third type of magical practitioner we're going to take a look at were the freelance witches and wizards roaming about ancient Mesopotamia. They were referred to as the Kasifu or Kasaptu, and as best I can discern, practicing magic outside of the proper channels was always frowned upon, if not outright illegal. After all, if you had righteous intentions when practicing magic, you would just join the priesthood after all, where it was perfectly legal and acceptable to do so. So generally, they were practicing that aggressive magic and weren't terribly worried about the welfare of their neighbors. So maybe the ancient harsh laws were even just. In fact, out of 282 laws that Hammurabi saw fit to write down, the second of them was concerning magic and the use of it negatively. It read, "If a man charge a man with sorcery and cannot prove it, he who is charged with sorcery shall go to the river. Into the river he shall throw himself, and if the river overcome him, his accuser shall take to himself his house. If the river showed that man to be innocent, and he come forth unharmed, he who charged him with sorcery shall be put to death." So obviously, they took practicing a little freelance magic very seriously. And one story known as the Maklu gives us a fascinating insight into what they thought about witches. They described them as prowling the streets at night, stealing love from young men and withering away beautiful women. So they definitely sound like a menace and a blight to society you wouldn't really want just walking around. I find it amazing that over the course of the last 100 years or so, academics have only just begun to discover and decipher what was written on these clay tablets in cuneiform, and officially record this amazing magical history. But the knowledge of the ancient Mesopotamians never actually went anywhere, except for maybe underground. See, through the esoteric traditions and teachings of many secret societies around the world, this knowledge was never actually lost and was passed on through oral and sometimes written tradition from secret society to secret society, and helped other cultures bud and survive and even thrive, like their neighbors across the Mediterranean. I'm talking, of course, about Egypt. And if you know anything about ancient Egypt, you know that magic was a centerpiece of their kingdom, and throughout the entire duration of it, the Egyptians would consider magic, probably above anything else, the reason for their success. So next time, that's exactly what we're going to be taking a look at. But today, I hope you enjoyed this look at the mystical Mesopotamians and their magical inclinations. Hopefully it's inspired you to dig a little deeper. And as always, I encourage you to stay curious, my friends. Be indomitable, and I'll see you back here next time at the Outpost for another episode of East 10 Investigates.